Hello there, and welcome to Thank the Maker, a podcast about heroes, princesses, scoundrels, hokey religions, ancient weapons, and all things Star Wars. I'm Adam Russell.
I'm Ryan Key.
Hey, I'm Nick Ganbarian.
And we have a
do I
guest.
introduce myself?
No, I'm going to introduce you. I'm a professional.
Okay,
Look at me. Special guest. Very special guest that I'm super stoked about. Shawn, I didn't even ask you how to pronounce your last name, so I'm going to
fuck it up.
shoot it.
Oh, I forgot I can't curse.
Shawn Ewashko.
Close, Ewashko.
Ewashko. Damn it.
There we go.
All right.
It's Star Warsy. Ewa.
It's super Star Wars. It's super. I got called Ewok a lot.
Yeah.
Hey.
I ain't mad at it though. They're cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially for our age. We love Ewoks. We're not like those old grumpy dudes.
Yeah.
I
exactly.
wanted to wait till we were actually live to meet Shawn. What's up, dude? I'm Ryan.
What's
we
up, Ryan?
do it live. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I love it.
How you doing, man?
Real good. Real good. Thank
Right
you
on.
guys for having me.
Thanks for being here, man. So Shawn is, I'm just going to say right at the top, an Emmy Award winner.
Wow.
Yep.
We haven't had one of those yet, huh?
First time.
I have a moon, man. Does that count?
I mean, that's pretty cool too, Ryan. That's pretty cool too.
Hey, I won a bunch of bowling trophies back in the day. So Shawn is a visual effect.
A visual
Yeah. It's my fault. It's my fault.
You did it. Visual effects production manager for the three main flagship, pun intended, Star Trek series right now. Believe it or not, we've got Star Trek on the Star Wars podcast.
Everybody lives for a good crossover, dude.
Yeah, the
I think
crossover
so.
you didn't know
I
you
think
needed.
so.
It's a
Yeah,
mashup,
for sure.
you know?
Yeah.
New Star Trek is dope.
It's
I'm not
great,
fully
dude.
up to date, but it's there. I feel like the groove they've hit the groove. They know like it's great now. It's always been great. It's just more a little actiony. Looks great because of you.
I agree. I agree 100%. I love New Trek.
Yeah, so we were talking before we started. I think I'm the only one that grew up on Star Trek out of the three of us. Nick, you watched a little bit later in life. Ryan, you were never into Star Trek at all, right?
Nope.
Was in your lane.
No, well, I mean, do you need, as a young person, you need someone to show you something like Star Trek? You do, right?
Yeah.
Like
Same with
you
Star
need
Wars,
someone
probably.
to be like, come and sit down and check this out. I never had that, so I was just a Star Wars mainliner, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a Trekkie's worst enemy, where I'm like, I love the J.J. Abrams movies, you know, like I don't.
I like those too.
It's just like,
Yeah.
it wasn't something that was like in my household, you know, like my parents didn't watch, like my dad didn't watch Star Trek, and for however I got through my young life, I actually like don't think I ever had a good friend, you know, that was super into it either, because that's probably how it happens too when you're at that age.
I mean,
of, like,
I think
finding
Trek
the stuff you love.
Trek was more adult oriented. I feel like, you know what I mean? I think that's a fair assessment for, especially, you know, I mean, now we have things that are geared a little bit towards youthful people. But I think generally a fair assessment would be that Trek was geared towards adult. I mean, I wouldn't have been exposed to Trek if it wasn't for my mother. You know, we said that beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And really my experience with Trek growing up was playing with the action figures. You know, the old kind of action figures that they had of like Data and the fucking Klingons and whatever. You know,
Yeah.
I love those things. You know, they were super cool to me. It's what made me watch it. You know?
Well, the interesting thing that some Star Wars or Star Trek fans may not know is that there's actually a long history of crossover, at least like on the production side, with Star Trek and Star Wars. ILM being I mean, for a lot of different franchises and a lot of great sci-fi movies back in the day, being the effects house that handled the effects. Like some of the most mind-blowing stuff in Star Trek back in the day came from ILM. So there's
they worked on a lot of stuff back then.
It's like that thing where like space just brings people together. You know, mortal enemies on the ground can be friends on the International Space Station. Same thing on the screen, you know? So you're obviously a huge Star Wars fan, though. We talked a little bit about it before, and I see it on your social media. You know, you're at Galaxy's Edge, or you're at cons, you know, playing with lightsabers, cosplaying.
Yeah.
So you went to the Return of the Jedi 40th anniversary recently. So
I did. Yep.
Talk a little bit about, well, actually before that, you're a production manager. So in VFX, a production manager versus a versus a visual effects supervisor. Are those terms somewhat interchangeable, or can you kind of describe what your role's like or what your responsibilities are for listeners?
Sure, yeah. So, for what we do in our group, I want to preface this with that our group and our dynamic doesn't really exist anywhere else in the industry. We have a very unique setup and ecosystem that we kind of thrive in, and it's comprised of our head supervisor Jason Zimmerman, who's a friend of mine. He's my boss. I say quotes because it doesn't feel that way. We've been friends for a time. We built this. I helped him to build this. I would like to believe that the ecosystem that we have is not really based on. I don't treat my teams as if I'm their boss. He doesn't ever treat me like I'm his boss. It's that very like fluid. I don't ever want to say family, because whenever you say family in a work environment, it feels super toxic. But like, but it is. It's familial in a sense that like, we all have an equal say in how things go. And he has allowed me to really oversee the teams of Star Trek Picard, Discovery, and Strange New Worlds. As well as other shows that are outside the Star Trek universe, of course. But we work on things. So for him, he's the main supervisor, who he drives the overall look of the shows. He in turn with our other supervisors that are on board with us, whether they're on set or whether they're in-house. We have another in-house supervisor, Brian Tatosky, who he helps oversee the look of the visual effects as well. And what I do as a production manager in the day-to-day is I oversee all of the teams. So I make sure that everyone's on schedule, everyone's on budget. I make sure that all the producers are doing what they have to do, all the coordinators are doing what they have to do, all of our systems are operating the way they're supposed to be. And occasionally my job is very, since my job doesn't really exist anywhere else, I do a lot of semi-producing here, supervision here. I do a little bit of everything, and that's why we call myself a project manager or a production manager. But really, I'm here to support the teams. I'm here to support Jason and what he does, and our senior producer Alexandra. I'm here to I basically I'm here to make sure that everyone else is taken care of, and we're all getting things done together and on as us as a team sees fit.
Yeah. So you're not just sort of overseeing and managing the post pipeline. You would be on set, looking at things as they go, prepping like all along the way. The whole process. Sometimes
it depends on the show. I don't go up to Canada, and most of our shows shoot in Canada. But I was on set for Picard for a little bit in season 1. And on. Oh boy. But we have an on-set team who deals with that stuff. So usually what I do is I'm facilitating what the on-set team is doing and how that is impacting our then production team in-house.
So the interesting thing to me, and like the main reason I wanted to have you on, is because now that we're in this call it television still, I guess, for lack of whatever the new term is in the streaming era, we're in an era of Star Wars TV, which is a first. None of us grew up with Star Wars TV because, we're old enough that the Clone Wars happened in our adult lives, and that was animation, so it's different. So we're now watching this live action stuff happen, and it looks insane. And yes, we know a lot about the technology, but it's still very interesting to me, and it'll be interesting to hear your perspective on how you think, or how you in the Star Trek world pull off these amazing visuals on a TV budget and a TV timeline, and how, what do you think about what they're doing over at Lucasfilm? And if you have any insight or thoughts, because we are going to, tomorrow, at the time of this recording, learn a little bit about season 3 of The Mandalorian. So we thought it'd be a good time to get your insight and just, talk about some of our favorite shots and, see what you can offer.
Yeah, what did you? I guess I'd like to know when you first saw Mandalorian season 3 and learned about the technology of basically the huge LED screen soundstage. Like, what is that something that you knew would happen eventually, or was it a surprise? Like, what was your kind of reaction to that?
Well, I knew it happened in the previous seasons because we've been running our own AR walls for the last several years since like Picard season 3. or since Discovery season 3. And we were actually running in kind of in tandem with the technology at the same time as Mandalorian season 1 when they first started using it. So although they aired before our season aired, we were kind of doing the same things at the same time. I think they utilized it. I think they utilized it well early on. I was a little surprised by season 3. You know, I think that it was you know, the thing about the AR technology and the AR wall, you know, when you use these LED walls, and one of the things that our group prides ourselves on the most is if you look at an IP like Star Trek, we are like much smaller budgets than most people believe. We are on TV budgets. And so we have to start our production like 6 months prior to like what we're doing to make sure that we're able to stay within those, you know, constraints. So we have to do things in a way that is very thought out, very, you know,
resourceful.
Everything is resourceful. It's meticulous. It's, you know, Jason is, you know, probably one of the greatest supervisors I've ever worked with. I've worked with a lot of supervisors, and he has an eye and an understanding of the technology, you know, and, you know, over the course of us using it over the last few years, we have an understanding of the technology of when to use it, when not to use it. And I think that what happens is that some productions don't really respect that.
Right.
As you know, so they're pushing more. They want more. They want more. They want to push it. They want to push it to the edge. They want to push it to the extreme. And I think that what happens is that the VFX tends to it tends to show a bit, personally. And I think that we saw a little bit of that in season 3 that we did not see in season 1. I think the first couple of seasons looked really good. And I think we saw some things, you know, that weren't so great in season 3, personally, in my opinion. I don't think that had anything to do with the visual effects people. I think it had more to do with probably their time constraints and, you know, who was pushing them to do what, you know.
Yeah, my understanding that I've kind of gained over the past several years, because we talked about this before, I've always been into effects, special effects, visual effects, since I was a little kid. You know, I was watching Movie Magic on Discovery, that series that you can actually go find on YouTube. It's all there. I've been watching it recently. So I've been super into it, and I've been very aware. And the thing that I'm learning more recently, watching specifically the Corridor Crew breakdowns, the VFX Artist React series, is that, yes, there's a certain sort of threshold for talent that, you know, any respectable series or film will need to be on a VFX team, but so much of it just comes down to time and human hours that can be afforded to put into something. So it's not, it's really easy for a viewer to watch something and go, oh, this looks like shit. They don't know what they're doing. This team sucks. This studio sucks. But it is just time, because we're quickly getting to a place where things can be, you know, AI is helping a lot. We've got all these new tools, but there's still a lot of stuff that's done almost hand-drawn, frame by frame, hand rotoscoping, hand painting.
Yeah. I mean, you look at like the Flash debacle that's happening right now. People are like, oh, Flash looked horrible, and it was, you know, it was X, Y, and Z. The fact of the matter is like, if you give me a week to do, I was an artist for, you know, over a decade. If you give me a week to do a shot, you're gonna get a week's worth of work. If you give me a month to make something, you know, and that's the extreme. You know, no one ever gets a month to work on a shot. I mean, on the films you do. On films you can get several months to work on a handful of shots, you know, whereas like in TV, man, you'd have to do 20, 30 shots a day sometimes. Like, and you know, there's smaller shots, but you got to turn stuff around much faster in TV. Whereas, you know, a film, you know, you might have some extra time, but at the same thing, you know, if a shot looks like it was done in a week, it probably was, because, you know, time is of the essence to, you know, the powers that be who want this thing to air, who want to release this movie, who want, you know, that sort of thing. And you know, there comes a point, and you know, as an artist, you know, I'm not an artist anymore, because I realized that, you know, we're not artists, you know, we're doing commercial art. I'm doing art for somebody else, you know. And I feel like I'm more of an artist now. I'm more of an artist in the job that I do now than I was actually doing the art that you see on television, because I have more control over how I get things done now, as opposed to, you know, if some supervisor wanted to put his stamp on some shots and making it saying, hey, I want it to look like this, and talking the client into saying yes to this, even though it may not be correct. You know what I mean? Like, these are things that, like, as an artist, you know, and any kind of artist, you know, whether you're, you know, commercial, or, you know, whether you're in music, or whether you're, lost my headphone. Whatever kind of art that you're in, like, there's always there's like a line where, like, you're an artist until this point, right?
Right.
Like, who's giving you the money to be that artist, right? If somebody's giving you money to be an artist, you're not really an artist. You're doing their job. You're doing whatever they want.
Commission,
you know?
it's a job, whatever.
Yeah, it's exactly right. You know, so I think that, you know, and I think that when fans look at something, you know, and they make these reactions, you know, online or whatever, I think it's hurtful to the artist. And I think sometimes you see that, you'll see, like, artists get sideways and stuff, because the fans don't really understand. They don't know what it's like, or they don't understand, like, what it takes to, or what the artist is under to get this done. Like, oh, that shot looks horrible. And the artist is like, damn, dude, well, the producer wanted it that way. My supervisor made me do it that way. You know what I mean? Like, there's all these, like, things that happen, you know? So it's hard for me to even say, like, anything about the visual effects without prefacing that, like, we don't know what the circumstances were.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, we think we have it bad when fans are like, that song sucks. They've been working on for like 2 years.
Yeah.
Been working on a song for like 2 years. But like,
and they don't know, right? They don't know
much
what
less
was going on.
Someone who, like, poured everything they had into the one day they were given to create something for television. Like,
Or you get, you know, we also would get, like, you know, where you have, like, a show. I've worked on some stuff that is, like, not avant-garde, that's not the term to use, but I've worked on some weird stuff, man, and where people are just like, oh, this is weird, this is ridiculous, why would you do this? And you're just like, it wasn't made for you. If you don't like, I get it, you don't understand. Like, if you write a song and you're like, the fans are like, they bug out because of it, and
we relate.
They don't really have to understand it, you know.
We relate.
Yeah, that's what you know what I mean. Like, it's being an artist is tough, man.
Yeah, but I was kind of just saying that, like, I've never found myself in a situation where I had someone breathing down my neck to, like, get something done, you know, so quickly that it wasn't going to be at the level that I wanted it to be. And you have to deal with that way more. Yeah. I mean, I've never had to deal with that. So I was kind of, I was making the point, like, we think we have it bad, you know, but, like, you guys are every bit the artists that we are as songwriters, and you have someone forcing you to finish your shit before you're ready to be done with it. I can't imagine.
Yeah, letting go is tough. So again, it's one of the reasons why I'm not an artist, because I just, you know, letting go of something is the worst thing is probably one of the worst feelings you have to do, right? I mean, saying something's done when you don't really believe it's done is like,
or like giving up control because it's your job, and if you become, I don't know, problematic, to use that word, then you're hard to work with, and maybe that affects your job, which affects your income, which affects your family. You know, it's like it's a slippery slope.
So that's huge in my industry, in visual effects. Like, you will, and I am also guilty of this, where I would rather work with someone I like than someone who's good if they're an asshole.
Yeah.
You know, if you're hard to work with, like, genuine, like, I would not, like, that being an artist and not wanting to let go of your work is different. But if you're, like, hard to work with, really hard to work with, like, I don't want to work with you. You know, like, I take pride in, like, my teams that I've built are, I mean, some of the greatest humans. I will sit here and I will say they're some of the greatest humans I would have ever met. They're good. I have helped to create, at least I feel like everybody else feels the same way, but I hope that I have helped create these teams that really work well together, and they complement each other's personalities. And, you know, I go through these long hiring processes because of it, you know, because I want the right people, you know, and I want people to be happy. You know, you don't want to hire somebody to do work for you, whether it's an artist or not, and they're not a right fit, you know. And I think that's really important. Like, you don't want to have somebody on, like, I love Star Wars, right? But if I was like, Star Wars sucks, like, I don't want to I don't want to be on here. I want to talk about Star Trek VFX. You know what I mean? If that was the case, like, you guys wouldn't have me on here. You know what I mean? Like, there would be no reason for me to be here.
Yeah.
You know, even if I was really, really good at what I did, it wouldn't matter, right? Because, like, that's not the point of this. And I think we have to look at other situations, you know, and I think that shows on screen a lot of the times. If you build a team of artists who don't work too well together, you know, you'll like, I from what my job is, I can tell if your 2D and 3D department was working well together. I can tell that by looking at your show or movie, you know, because there are some very, very indicative things to that process that I am aware of that most people might not be, but outside of our industry, but I'm aware of. I know, like, hey, this looks weird, and it's not because the producer made a bad decision. It's because 2D and 3D were not cohesive with one another. They were arguing. You know what I mean? That kind of thing happens.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend an entire episode talking about fan perception and, you know, respect of artists or lack thereof. Unfortunately, the majority of the time it's lack thereof. But I mean, the long history of Star Wars, especially in the early days, was about just what you're talking about, a team of people who had a vibe together. And that's not to say that there weren't assholes that contributed great things along the way, but they didn't stay there very long. Like, there, you know, it'd be like a one movie thing. I don't want to name the name, but there was a dude in, you know, on the original trilogy, or no, he was part of the digital transition. That didn't last long. He did some great work, but he didn't, you know, he butted heads with a lot of people, and he made his contribution. But when people look back at that experience and the team, and, you know, talk about what made something special or what made it work, some names don't end up on the list. You know what I mean? Because that stuff matters. And even today, there is so much. There's so much more at stake. It seems like, I don't want to have like a big economics discussion like we get into sometimes, but, you know, with like the stockholder focused way that the world runs in a lot of cases, that there are things like that have to be dealt with, and it sucks when it comes to art. But people either don't want to believe or are incapable of believing that the artists on the ground who are doing the work love what they're doing. They care deeply about every single pixel that goes on screen, and it's not a cash grab for them. You know, like, stockholder decisions are made, but when it comes down to it, these are artists. These are people who care so much about Star Wars, like just as much as any of us who are watching it, is the point I'm making. And
I can tell you right now, every single person who works on Star Wars loves Star Wars. For sure. I know a lot of people work on Star Wars. They love Star Wars.
Yeah.
You know?
We see it with all these, you know, the once a season, whatever season of television we've been getting lately, we get some sort of behind the scenes thing, and they sound like us, only, you know, like they're actually in the production. They love it, clearly.
Yeah, they really do. And it's a beautiful thing. You know, I think that's important. You know, if people are happy with what they're doing, they're going to produce good work. You know, and they do. I mean, you look at the stuff that's on screen, man. Some of that stuff, dude, like, all of these shows have some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen in my life. Think about it. We're 40-year-old guys or somewhere close to that. We are seeing things on television. We are seeing our childhood dreams, right? And again, like I said, I started with more sword and sorcery. I didn't really get into Star Wars till a little bit later in life, but we're seeing the things that we always wished we could have seen actually happen on screen, and it looks incredible, right? I mean, like, you know, like, it just, but whether it's where they're shooting it or how it's being directed, the writing, everything is so good in these shows. Like we're living in a time that, like, you know, you ever say, what a time to be alive? Like, what a fucking time to be alive, man. Right?
I feel
like we can go stand next to the Millennium Falcon in fucking Anaheim right now, you know, and like take a picture, and we can see an X-Wing, a full-size X-Wing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I wrote Rise of the Resistance, you know, for the first time a week ago, 2 weeks ago, like a week and a half, whatever.
Congratulations.
It was, you know what, like, when you walk out that elevator, man, and you see all those fucking stormtroopers, dude, like,
oh, dude,
when you see the theatrics and
you
like
just saying the sentence, just got goosebumps.
like you can't like we are in a time that like and honestly a lot of that, if you look at what's happening, they're using huge screens in there. They're doing things like it's a lot of AR shit. You know, when you're riding that ride and you're looking and you're seeing that space battle out there, that's what they're shooting on in Mandalorian. That's what they're shooting on in Kenobi in these shows. That's what I'm shooting on. You know what I mean? I'm shooting on these screens that they're projecting these space battles on, and it looks so rad.
Yes.
Like, how can you not be excited about that? You know, like there's like, it makes me excited. You know, thinking about it. Like, I want to go back down to Disneyland right now. Like, you can't look at that and not just be in awe and be like, how the artistry behind it, the people who built the models of those ships, the people who did the visual effects for the explosions and for the shoot, you know, for like, you can't not be in awe at that. You know, no one can. You know,
I think the line that gets blurred now between the films and the television from a VFX standpoint too is just,
dude, it's insane.
Like, I mean, if I really go back in my mind and scan through Kenobi, Mandalorian, Andor, the sequel trilogy, what was in the features that's not in those shows from a visual standpoint? What part of the series were you watching where you felt like, you know what, if this was a feature, this would be even better, or this would be even bigger, or this would be even gnarlier?
Few and far between, dude.
The final duel between Obi-Wan and Anakin would have been, that's what it would have looked like in a film if Obi-Wan had been a film. So it's I think, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but I never find myself watching Star Wars episodic stuff thinking, man, if this is really good, but if it was a feature, then we'd be talking. It's like,
thank a local VFX artist.
Yeah. Well, thank you to all of them.
Now they got to do it. Now they got to do it instead of on, you know. And I think the Star Wars shows Star Trek has a lengthier timeline than, you know, network television, for instance. I worked on network television where you're like, you might work on a shot on a Friday night and it airs on a Sunday morning. That kind of thing. I think that they operate on more of like our timeline where you can do all the visual effects for the show and then it airs 6 months later. So, you know, like, we're airing season 2 of Strange New Worlds now, and we finished Strange New Worlds season 2 last year. You know what I mean? Like, so there's a time that they have time to do it. It's less time than a film. You know, it's probably half as less time than a film, but it's a little bit more time, and they're doing that. They're doing that work. When you watch fucking like Andor is a perfect example of like,
oh, dude,
flawless visual effects.
Yeah.
Like, Andor, you watch that show and you live. You're in Ferrex, dude. You live in these environments. You live in these between it, whether it's, and it's not just visual effects, it's costumes, it's makeup, it's everybody in production. It's the whole process of filmmaking that is so beautiful, man. Like, especially in Andor. I love Andor the most because Andor is like the most grounded, right? It's the grungy, it's the realistic.
We're friends. This is my thing on the podcast. Lived in Star Wars, like grown up, lived in Star Wars. Didn't know it was gonna be a thing that I needed in my life, but it is by far my favorite. I mean, it's like, is it sacrilege to say that Rogue One is the best feature of all of the features? Probably,
I don't think so.
But it is.
I don't think so.
I don't
think so. I think
because of that
Rogue One
exact reason, it's just so lived in and real feeling, and I love
and the
that.
Stakes are so high, right?
Exactly.
Like,
yeah,
you know,
dude.
the stakes.
Yes, dude.
Whereas like the first 6, like, look, dude, like, none of the films outside of Rogue One and Andor, the stakes are not the same, right? Like, the stakes are so high that the whole time you're watching it, you're like white knuckled because you know what this. You know what's even funnier? You know what's even crazier? Star Wars Rebels, dude. Like, Rebels, the stakes in Rebels or Bad Batch, even there are some times in Bad Batch where like, and I've listened to some of your episodes where like, this is a show that is for kids, right? Yeah. No way, dude. I'm talking about where like I am like pushing my kid out the way, like, yo, I gotta finish watching this right now.
Yeah. When the Bad Batch is not on a Monster of the Week episode, when it's in a real episode,
when it's in a real episode,
it goes from 0 to 100, dude, for real. I mean, it's when it's in those types of episodes, it's running at full speed, 100.
And it's stakes. It's because of the stakes, right? 100%. Like, you know the stakes, right? And I think that's why Rogue Rogue One works because the stakes are so high, right? And that's one of my favorite Star Wars character of all time is Saw Gerrera.
Oh, yeah.
Because if no one raises the stakes like Saw Gerrera, right?
Yeah.
Like that dude's entire backstory is of like, I'm gonna raise the stakes as high as possible, and everybody else has to deal with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when he like that's.
But then,
and I think, man.
Well, to your point though, then also I'm going to build these sets and create these visual effects and these costumes and makeup and everything on a level. Not level's the wrong word, because Empire Strikes Back, it's on a level, right? I mean, then Return of the Jedi is on the next level in a style, I guess, that has never been done before. And if it hits you right, it's gonna hit you harder than anything Star Wars has ever done. And it did that for me. I remember watching Rogue One feeling like, oh, okay, so Saving Private Ryan in space, yes, this is everything I ever wanted out of this. And there's not a single lightsaber in the film, Yeah. So I love it.
I feel that, I feel a little bit like that about Solo too, man.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people might not feel that way, but I think Solo is one of the most rewatchable because there are some moments. It's super fun and the stakes are high.
I think everybody loves Solo. I think it's an online thing that's weird. It's an online
thing.
Like loudest voice in the room thing.
Yeah.
I think everybody loves Solo.
Dude, you're talking about
Solo's
stakes.
Good, man.
You're talking about stakes. I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people, whether they're in special effects, they're in prop building, or they're in visual effects, and on the digital side, you enjoy what you're doing, right? You enjoy making things, but when you know the story, whether or not you've read the whole script, but you know what the story's about, you know the characters, the stakes of the story probably get you much more deeply invested in your work, and that raises the stakes for you as an artist, I would assume.
Yeah. I mean, when I was an artist, we don't really see scripts and stuff. We get shots and we don't even know the context of the shots generally, unless we get like a sequence. If we get a whole sequence as an artist, like, and I think it's the same for all shows when they give their sequences to vendors who do the work, they're not, one guy might get 5 shots, one guy might get 3 shots. They don't know the context of the work. But as doing what I do as a production manager, project manager, I read all the scripts. I see that stuff way before it ever becomes a visual effect.
Right.
And yes, when I see the stakes, I'm like, this is what's up right here.
Yeah.
This is what's important. There are things that I like Star Trek Discovery. I like to use that as a good example because Discovery is a show that they play with the stakes a lot. The EPs are not afraid to like really do some really cool stuff, man. Not that the other shows don't, but the other shows are a little bit more in line with Star Trek, where I think Discovery goes off of, they stick to their 100% Star Trek, but they do things that we've never seen before in Star Trek, I feel like.
Really deep personal stories.
Yeah, real deep personal stories, man, where there are very, very high stakes generally. And I like that, I love that, Discovery going away this season, this will be the last season coming up is really, it's the show that I started on. And it was one of the things that like, I always drew parallels to the Star Wars universe because they talk about things in Star Wars and Mandalorian and Kenobi and all these shows that like, you don't see on television anywhere else. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's not just lightsabers and blasters and stuff. Like this is real shit that they're talking about, like real things that are like emotional and like, like Kenobi going after and saving Leia. Like forget about what anybody thinks about what that may be like. If you're a dad or if you're not a dad, if you're just someone who can like relate to that, like there are stakes that are in that are very identifiable to people. Even if you're not in that specific situation, like it's identifiable, like what he was going through during that time, what she was going through during that time, like, so there are things that I think that these shows do now that are just, man, it's so beautiful, right? Like it's cool. It's cool like to sit there and be able to experience these things. Like, I don't know about you guys, but if you didn't like shed a tear on some of these things, I mean, like Andor, like if you didn't cry during Andor, dude, like if he didn't make you cry, like there's some go check yourself out, bro. Something's really wrong with you. Like if that Marva speech, didn't like put you sideways and you were like, yeah, dude, fuck the Empire. I'm gonna go punch the Nazi in the face right now. You know what I mean? Like that was like you can't watch that stuff and not get emotional, man.
My second watch through of Kenobi, which I only watched it when it first came out.
Yeah.
In real time, and then at Star Wars Celebration this year, Nick and I randomly got a message from a fan the night before the Sunday of the convention, and was like, "Hey, we didn't get into any panels. You know, we applied for them all, but we didn't get. It's a lottery, and we didn't get any. And we got a fan reached out through Instagram, was like, "Hey, I have a couple extra tickets for the Kenobi panel. Do you guys want to go?" And we're like, yes, we do. So we went. It was super emotional. You know, the whole cast was on stage. It was super emotional. But the first thing I did, I was flying. It was Sunday, so I was flying home on Monday from London. First thing I did when I got to my hotel that night was download Kenobi. Like, okay, this is what I'm going to watch on my 10-hour flight back to LA. I'm going to watch it all the way through back to back. I haven't done that yet. So it's going to be like a 6-hour long movie. I was a mess. I mean, I was an absolute mess. It hit so much harder than the first time when it was broken up.
It looked amazing. You feel in it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I will say that as far as like the just kind of talking back to the point of like episodic versus feature film, watching Kenobi episodically, it did kind of break it up into like, oh, well, now I know this is coming, this thing with Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi win and like I get it. Leia, little girl, he's saving. I get it. But like, have we seen enough of that now for 2 weeks? When you watch it all together in 6 hours straight, it's a whole different ride. It's like, I don't know. It propels it faster.
It was supposed to be a film.
It was,
Wasn't that like
yes.
thing?
Originally it was.
And they like cut it out, right?
Well, I think that based on the series, I think the script just never wasn't going to be a 3.5 hour long movie, and that's even cutting it down. It was just hard for them to tell the story.
I think that people need to, and fans are never going to understand that either. Like, I think that there are some things that are meant to, like the prequel trilogies, they're hard to watch individually.
Yes.
Yeah. They feel weird when you watch them individually.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you watch them back to back, and I know it's a long ride, but I do this to Lord of the Rings all the time. If you watch them back to back, like it is a complete something, and it's fucking awesome. You know what I mean? Like it is good, man. Like,
it's hard to just watch the Phantom Menace and walk away feeling.
Yeah, you can't like you can't because that's the first act, right? You can't watch the Phantom Menace and walk away and be like, oh, 100%. It feels weird. Yeah. And you can't just watch Attack of the Clones. Because that's weird, right? You feel like it starts in the middle of a movie and it ends in the middle of a movie. It never feels organic, right? But if you watch them all together, I think that's the thing with Kenobi. Kenobi, people are always like, oh, the pacing is wrong and all this other stuff. And I disagree. I just think it's meant to be watched in a sitting. And it was unfortunate that they had to release it in an episodic, way. But watch the shit. Everybody just go watch the shit in one sitting, man. Stop messing around. Go do it. It's beautiful, man.
Just go try to have fun. Turn over a new leaf and try to have fun.
Can we talk about that last battle though in Andor though? How good that looked.
Oh, dude.
Like Unreal. I was shook. And these are practical effects. These are visual effects mixed with practical effects that like I was like, that shit was like scary almost. You know what I mean? When that fight pops off, man, like you're like, what is happening? People are scrambling on the ground. That's beautiful stuff. I know we're talking about Mandalorian, but man.
Well, they did great. Andor is to like Disney Star Wars television what Rogue One is to Disney Star Wars movies. Like they're both the cream of the crop.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, I agree. It's so good, man. Well, man, I love you guys. A lot of people I talk about are always like, oh, we don't like the other stuff. And I'm just like, I was too old for Clone Wars, right? I was too old to watch the cartoons. I was way too old for Rebels. And I wasn't like in a mind state at the time. I rewatched all that stuff as an adult. And I love it. I love it now. I love it now, but had I watched it when it aired, like I would have been like, I would not have.
I watched Clone Wars.
I was in a different space.
2 years ago, right, guys? I think a year and a half, 2 years ago. And getting to the finale of the Clone Wars was,
you watch it as an adult,
most cathartic experiences of my life.
they made this for children. What are you fucking kidding me? Like you're like balling, like you're emotional, and you're just there's no way. And kids are just like, ha ha ha, look at that. Yeah. You know, it's like, my kid loves Chopper, right? Because I love Chopper because I'm like Chopper, right? And like my kid laughs at Chopper all the time, and I'm just like, bro, but Chopper's mad serious, dude. Like, watch this character progress throughout Rebels, right? Like, there's character development in a fucking droid, right?
Yeah.
And a little robot committing war crimes. Yeah, there's character.
Committing, bro, dude. I saw that meme the other day, and I was like, this is the most perfect thing ever.
Yeah.
The most perfect thing ever. It really is.
All right, let's talk about some actual VFX shots.
Yeah.
So I have a few that I picked. One just to kind of talk about the technology, but then a couple because when I saw them, I had, again, being a person who pays close attention to this, had a moment where I was like, how did they do this in budget on this timeline, on this television show? How is this happening?
$1 million.
So, I mean, Disney has more money than
They've got
anyone ever.
Deep pockets. But yeah, let's do it.
So we're going to talk about Chapter 15, The Believer. This is Season 2, Episode 7. So this is, I'm going to forget the name of the planet, but it's when Bill Burr's character with Mando, they go to the Imperial base, right? And there's the classic like Western fight on top of the train kind of thing. The Raiders come to sort of hijack them. And I went back and watched the ILM breakdown, and this was supposedly supposed to be a shot or an entire sequence done in the volume, but because of COVID, they had to do it outside. You may not know the answer, but you may be able to infer something. The stuff in, the sort of the decision-making process between the volume or outside under the actual sun with a blue screen, how much of that has to do with just the how bright an LED wall can get these days, and how much of it is just like a kind of like a space consideration? Because my understanding is the walls aren't quite bright enough to fully duplicate real outdoor light, and you got to light the shit out of them with, you got to add a giant key light or something just to pull it off. What do you think?
I think it depends on the shots. For us, that's not an issue because we're in space.
Right.
For like Tatooine, like there's probably going to be some challenges with that, and it depends on the wall, and I hate to say this being recorded, but I don't know for a fact, but I am under the assumption that they are using an older LED wall volume that is not as expansive as the newer technology that has been out in the last 36 months, 24 months. And I think that is probably what is the biggest hurdle that they are going to. I mean, I like when I talk about, I've had this conversation previously, and when I talk about like their technology, because it's always like they started the technology. They did do some things, before other people. But because of that, and again, this is just my assumption, they locked themselves into a technology that may not be as relevant today as it was when they did that. So I believe that that's probably the biggest hurdle that they have. Yeah. That's why they would have to overcompensate or compensate for that said technology. You couldn't shoot, you had to shoot certain distances from the wall at that point. There's pixel pitch that comes into play in a lot of those situations. The older walls or the first walls, they generated a lot of heat, so they could not get them as bright as they wanted to. Those kind of situations did arise at that point. So, and I know that that's their proprietary stuff and that they own those volumes. So, and I think that the technology moved so quickly that I think that it sort of left them a little bit behind than other productions in some cases. All
right, well, let's look at this little sequence here, and I'm gonna switch some things around so we can do this. See how this.
I love the setup you guys got. This is super dope. I want the setup for my D&D group. I'm gonna tell my DM he's got to do this. This is good.
Hey, well, I can take no credit whatsoever, but you should do it. Okay, so this one right here, they shot this outside on blue screen. The crazy thing to me when I look at this, I mean, you do it on the volume, you build all the assets beforehand, and it's all in camera. Everything behind the characters is in camera. But this all being on blue screen, I mean, this is it's still a digital world, but they have to comp it all together. I assume it's made easier by the fact that no one on top of these vehicles has hair. Even if Bill Burr was out there, he's bald. You know, so comping together a bunch of smooth heads and a bunch of armor is easier. But I don't get it. How this level. I mean, it's a completely digital environment with people on half a vehicle with a bunch of blue walls. Yeah. Please tell me the secrets, Shawn.
I mean, there's no secrets. I mean, this is artistry. This is, you know, before we had the volumes, you know. And again, I can refer back to Trek because, you know, we did a sequence in season 1 where Captain Burnham is fighting Klingons on the top of this planet, and it's I visited set that day by chance. That's why I use this as an example. And when I visited this set, it was, you know, Neville Page's monster suit and this Klingon inside this suit fighting Captain Burnham on this giant. Nothing else was in the room. Everything else was green. Everything else was giant. And this is where the artistry comes in for the artists, because, you know, they don't just have to, you know, replace the background. This is not just, you know, hey, we're going to Photoshop this background in place. Like, this is moving. We've got shadows moving in some stuff that you could see. We've got all kinds of like glow that's happening on the sides of them because they're outside to make them kind of live in that world. There's a lot of things happening in here. I don't think there's any secrets. I think this is just the artists like taking this blue screen footage and, you know, doing what they could do best. You know, like that was definitely you know, he falls off. That's a specific visual effect. That's one specific shot of him falling off. There's a specific shot. All of these are individual little shots that like these artists needed to make cohesive to make this scene look like they'd all live together, you know?
So
I don't understand. It doesn't. Not real.
I wish I could pull up like a comp and just like show you guys what it looks like and like step by step. But like, you know, before and afters don't usually help anyway when you show people stuff like that.
Right.
But it's a lot of, you know, for that scene, for instance, right. You know, I'm assuming that some of that vehicle was practical.
Right.
So some of that probably had to be replaced at some point,
like above the wheels, from what I saw in the breakdown.
Like above the wheels, right? See, I didn't watch the breakdown. So like they had to replace the entire thing above the wheels. That's one, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got CG artists who are building those assets. You've got, you know, animators who, you know, maybe some of those are stunt doubles, maybe some of those are digi doubles, right? So some of these people here are not real, right? Some of these people are like digital doubles hanging out. Like maybe these 3 guys even could be. I mean, I don't know for sure. They could have shot that practically, but there are digi doubles all over this sequence for sure. Mm-hmm. So you've got animators having to animate guys maybe falling off and guys, you know, getting hit and getting shot, that sort of thing. So you've got, you know, 2D animators who are animating these 3D characters. You've got, and then at the end of the pipeline, you've got compositors. What I did is we get the truck, we're going to get the digi doubles, and we're going to get the live action footage, right? And then we have to take that live action footage, lay it over, you know, we got to start with the live action footage. We got to lay that model in there. We got to rotoscope people back on top. We got to get those digi doubles in there. We got to make those digi doubles feel like they're real and they exist, because they don't look like that before when you get them. They look like they look worse than action figures sometimes. And I'm not saying that as a something against 3D people. I'm saying that as in like, you get a fake person as a digital double and you have to make it live in this real world, you know? And I think that some of that is hard to do. And these artists, man, did a great job with this sequence, you know? I mean,
so patience must be something that every digital artist needs tons of, right?
Yeah.
This seems like so tedious, like beyond tedious.
It is tedious, especially for a sequence like this where, like, you know, because the truck had to be replaced, like there's these legs might have been having to been replaced at some point. The footage that went on top might not have been perfect. They might not have been lit perfect. They would have had to relight it themselves in comp. I mean, there's a lot of things that, you know, there's a lot of motion blur happening. So as you could hide things, but sometimes that reveals things as well. You
Yeah,
know,
that's the thing.
you can look at their background, which is fully CG, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the motion blur on the background of the trees, and you don't see that on the foreground, right? And that's a purposeful thing because you wouldn't be able to see the action generally if it was all blurred out. But like if you look at, like, that's probably not a good frame, but if you look at some of the stuff, like, so they did some real work on this scene, man. You know, whereas if they did it on the volume, like, I don't know if it would have been easier. I mean, it would have been a bit easier. It would have been a bit easier. I know, you know, the volume doesn't take away work.
Yeah.
The volume, you have to do the work beforehand on the volume.
Right. You front load.
You know? So it doesn't. You front load with the assets, and you front load with what's happening. You know, but I think this looks really good for what it is.
Yeah.
You know, I think they did a good job.
I mean, the unanswerable question in this conversation, because no one here works at Disney or can see the budget breakdown, but I mean, I understand how this stuff is made. I know just from spending more than half my life in Photoshop, I understand the concepts, but it's the quality on the budget and the time frame they had to do it in. I mean, I know at some point they just start handing out handfuls of shots to different effects houses. You just got to do what you got to do, and you just have to spend the money.
Yeah.
So did they just find themselves in this COVID situation where it's like, okay, this is going to cost double now? You know what I mean? Like, does it get there with? I mean, I don't know how different Paramount is versus Disney in terms of that kind of shit. You know,
it's probably not double, but I think that there's definitely a cost effectiveness in when you use the volume as opposed to not, right?
Right.
But I think at this point, like in COVID, they had to do what they had to do. Right. I think that this was something that they probably had planned for due to COVID. You know, and again, I didn't watch that, but I assume that, you know, because this is how we did it before the volume, right? And this was, you know, we were not that far away from doing it this way all the time. And again, like, I think that most things that people think are on the volume might not actually be on the volume.
Right.
You know, I think that they do a lot more on green screen than, you know, we say we do sometimes, just because, like, there may be a reason why this couldn't be done on the volume, you know, and I'll give you a perfect example. Like, this probably could have been done on volume, no problem. But there are certain things that can't be done on a volume because of the complexity of it. You know, we've got, you know, a show that for instance, we've got a show where there's like a tank throw that we shot on a volume, and this is not Star Trek related. This is something else I'm doing on the side, but there's a project that we're doing. It was done exactly the way that you would have to do a project for a volume. Like, this was made to be done on a volume, and they did it the right way. But there's a shot that's like a tank throw, right? And you would think, because it goes volume to tank throw to volume, right? And if you look at it, you're not seeing that you don't notice that that's what's happening, right? Because the artists do such a good job at that. But you can't do a tank throw in a volume. Like, there's no way you can do like a 360. You'd have to have a 360 volume, you know, of anything that goes outside of that volume. And that's the constraints that you run into, right? Like, you can't go too high, you can't go too low. You got to have camera angles that make sense in the world of a volume, right? And I think that that's why some things break on some shows, because they try to use the volume for things that. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, before I say what I'm about to say, I guess what I'm saying is, like, there are times that we should use the volume, and times that we shouldn't use the volume.
Right.
For this particular case, I think that could it have made it cheaper and a little bit easier for them to use the volume in this particular case? Sure. Yeah. But I don't think that would make it look bad or worse. I think that either way they did it, I think it would still look, you would still get the achieved effect.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I think that maybe, you know, you could have gotten a little bit more of the interactivity between the foreground and the background better with using the volume, only because there are too many variables when you don't use the volume. There's a lot more
Right.
variables, right? There's all kinds of things that happen. So I think that you can get a better look with the volume and for something like this. But again, like, it's knowing when to use it and when not to.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that in this particular situation, they knew that they can get away without doing it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think they sold it. You know,
the other thing I wonder, and they haven't talked about this specifically, but I assume prior to the volume, you know, I'm thinking like Avatar was the first big application, the first, you know, early visual virtual production, where what they're seeing behind the camera, well, they're holding an iPad with handles. They're seeing the background that's going to be there. In the case of Avatar, it's motion capture, but they are doing this in these productions as well, right? Where they're framing shots by seeing the unreal world on an iPad. So there is a little bit of best of both happening, right? So because traditionally, like when Lucas did the prequels, it's all on green. In a lot of the Marvel movies, it's like, well, I hope it turns out. I hope the visual effects artists don't all jump off a bridge when they have to figure out this shot.
To some extent, I've never seen the whole visual of the guy looking at the iPad. I don't know if that's really correct. I feel like that's kind of like sure, that could be a thing. I've not seen it done that way. I don't think that's how they're doing it. I don't believe that's how they're doing it, because I think that you would need a director that would follow constraints that way. And I think that the directors in these universes are, I don't know if I should say it that way, but they are very, very talented in a way that you can't constrain them to.
They're brought on for their strengths, not to be constrained by.
Exactly. Like when we're talking, like I can say for us, when we're talking about virtual production, we work with some incredible directors, and these guys are 3 months ahead of before they're shooting, 4 months ahead of before they're shooting, and they're laying out how they want to shoot this. Like we are catering to them and how they want to shoot through a window. So we got a wild glass, and we got to make sure that the volume that's behind that makes sense for them to go. You know what I mean? Like it's an artistry that I don't think that people realize sometimes. So there are situations where they can sit there and look, and it looks like they're seeing everything on screen, but that's the wrong way to do it. You know what I mean? If your director gets there and he's like trying to direct shots through an iPad or through the camera, and again, like any directors out there who are hearing this, like, I'm fucking sorry, but like that's the wrong way to do it. Like you gotta you have to, and I have to believe that these guys on these Star Wars shows are doing it to where they're plotting out what they're going to shoot. They know the angles they're going to use.
Yeah,
they
all
know
these are fully prevised regardless.
Yeah, like these are fully previs. All the 3D is done. Like, yes, it's going to be shot on an AR wall, but what's it going to look like back there? What is it going to look like back there, right? I wish I could talk about some of the stuff we're doing right now for this season. I can't, but man, because there are things that are happening where we have to do the 3D. We have to previs. We have to look at these shots because the director has to be like, what am I going to see when I'm looking at this wall?
Right.
What am I going to be able to shoot? What are the constraints of that? You know what I mean? And what are the benefits? Or because here's the deal. Like, if you get somebody who is like, hey, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, whether you say so or not, you could break the wall. You could break it. You know, there are things, and I'm going to wait. I'm going to see if you bring it up. If not, I'm going to bring it up. There are things in like season 3 of Mandalorian, they broke it. And I'm like, I don't know whose fault that was, but it was broken, you know? And I think that if you have a director who's on an iPad, who's trying to drive shots on the day, that's where you're going to that's where it looks bad.
Yeah.
You know, these guys, this was even this was prevised and thought out. They prevised the truck, they prevised the chase, they prevised the explosion, they prevised all of that because they had to. If not, if they would try to do that like out of nowhere, like it wouldn't work. You know, it would not look half as good as it did.
It's interesting. Like my brain, my OCD brain, cannot imagine making a film that has anything more than a couple talking heads in a room without a full previs, dude. Like I would go all in. Every frame of the movie would be previs before a single inch of film rolls.
And some really good directors, they want that.
Yeah,
you know,
and then some other people like Rodriguez talked about. He even in the volume, he would have them throw up a green screen because being an old school visual effects, well, like gory special effects back in the day type dude.
But no one's gonna. Oh, I don't even want to say that.
He said he liked the run and gun nature of green screen. You know,
sure.
I didn't fully buy it myself, but
I mean, those films you could tell though, right? You could tell by those films, and that's not a knock on him. That's just they're not Star Wars, they're not Star Trek, they're not visual effects heavy films. They're not. That's not what he's known for, right?
Right.
So if you're that kind of director, sure, dude, like run and gun is your thing, right? Like that is because you're performance driven. You're driven by the people interactions, not by the world interactions. And I think that makes a difference, right? If you're trying to drive a world, then you need to be cognizant of all of those things. You know, you can't just drop a green screen back there and be like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna run and gun." You know?
Yeah.
You could, but then you know you get these things that are not. You don't live in the world at that point,
right?
You know?
All right, let's look at another shot, a season 1 shot that I feel like has been talked about so much, but I just love it because when I saw it, my brain went straight to the Unreal Engine demo from their conference when they announced this technology. They did their demo shot with that motorcycle where you could see the reflections of the world just to flex on everybody. They picked the shiniest thing they could, and they put it in front of the camera. And I feel like they put this shot in The Mandalorian to do the exact same thing, but I just still love it. It's just still brilliant. So, sorry, boomer alert. Open a new thing. Here we go.
Oh yeah, I knew it was going to be this shot.
It's like such a good trick too. You know, it's a good like little filmmaking trick, and if you miss it, you miss it. But when you see it, you see it. The helmet. You see the guys jumping in the canyon, right?
Yeah, it's so good.
So this is the kind of thing that if you don't get it in camera, it's a visual effects chore, right? So like, let's say they had to fully replace this helmet, and in that case, probably most of the Mandalorian himself. I guess the question is, how much time and energy did they save by having the volume in this case? You know what I mean?
Yeah. They saved a good amount. Probably not as much as you think. The thing about this particular shot in here, which I love this shot too, because this was a good example of how to use stuff that's really good. I think the biggest thing is you know, that shot's been done on complete green a million times before, successfully. You know, it really just took away the man hours of like people painting stuff out, and anytime you have something reflective is really a chore,
right?
And I think that you know they did save a lot of time with paint work and patchwork and things of that sort. It's probably less than you think though.
Okay.
It's probably less than you think. I don't want to take the movie magic out of it for you, but it's probably a little less than you think.
I mean, maybe I'm just so stoked on the technology that I
mean it looks amazing, right? Like I mean it's a living world that like you feel like you can walk into it. I mean, that's honestly the biggest thing. You know what I would say even more is that the Unreal guys, the artists who built the asset,
Yeah, like look at
are
this
really the heroes, right?
Hmm.
Because it's not even like, because look, we still have to, like, he's walking in an environment that doesn't exist, right?
Yeah, he's
You know,
standing in a
and
building
he's
in
being
LA.
lit. He's being lit by an environment that doesn't exist. And I think
Yeah.
that goes, they still did a lot of the work outside of it to build that asset. That asset is beautiful. It reflects within his suit in a really good way.
Mm-hmm.
The colors are warm, like everything looks super perfect. Even like this whole thing, man, you know, like it's look at how good it feels. It feels like it's happening right there, right? And I think that the savings that they had was not having to deal with, you know, paint and removing green spill from people and things of
Mm-hmm.
that sort. You know, I think that's the biggest savings.
Or what about even weather? No one, like, weather's
Yeah.
got to be an issue for a lot of things, right?
Weather's a big deal too. I mean, it could have been 1,000,000 degrees, and they could have shot it in a desert for 1,000,000 degrees, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
if they shot it on, you know, a long enough lens, they wouldn't have got really reflections and stuff like that.
Mm.
They would have had to do some things, you know. But I mean, they didn't have to, because they could shoot it at a little studio in LA, and it looked
Yeah.
like it was really shot out there, you know.
Yeah. It's just
I love that shot, because I feel like that's a really good example of the volume being used in a way that it's supposed to be used.
right.
You know, like that's what the distance, everything that a volume is supposed to be used for, they did it. That is the perfect thing that they use it for. Exactly how it's supposed to be done. That's why it looks beautiful. That's why it looks real. You know,
Yeah.
it looks super lived in. It looks like he's there, you know.
And it's a really
Really good example of that volume.
and a smart use of, like, it's smart world building of the scene itself too, like the fact that it's a cave but it's got an opening, so it's got all these elements that, like you're saying, just take advantage of all the best opportunities
Yeah.
that you have there. And it's a dude that's fighting dudes that are surrounding him, so
And
they're not-
I
he's
love
not
the
a
way they
chase.
lit it.
Yeah,
They lit it properly from the top. They lit
Mhm.
everything properly to where it feels like you can't tell that that's not shot outside. It's
Yeah.
really hard to tell. Like if you watch that, I've watched that scene. If you watch that scene on a good TV, not my TV shit, but if you watch it on on a good TV, like on a real screen, like it looks good, man. Like it
Yeah.
looks really good. I don't know. And again, like I've seen those shots done 1,000,000 times in green screen, and I don't like to take things away. I don't like to take things away from the green screen way of doing it as the volume. I think that the volume, if it's used properly, it's a savings. It's successful, because I've seen it go the opposite way, where they use the volume and we got to fix a bunch of shit in post, and it's a nightmare. You know, it's actually more expensive. You know,
dude.
I
So
think that it's only gonna get bigger and gnarlier. Like to your point of how you got to make sure you're not shooting too low or too high. Are we gonna live in a world where one day, as an actor, you walk onto a soundstage and like they're just like, oh well, yeah, the sun is at high noon, literally
full holodeck style.
It's like literally 100 feet above your head. That's still LED wall all the way up there. And like you're just now living in this. We don't ever have to go outside. We don't have to worry about weather. We don't have to worry about temperature. We don't have to, like, will it evolve to that point?
I think it could for some things. I don't think we could shoot everything on it. Again, like Robert Rodriguez is never going to do that. He wants to shoot in the desert. Yeah. Dudes driving down New Mexico desert freeway, dust coming up. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I think that there's a time and place for it. But yeah, I think that, look, I've seen some stuff shot on volumes that there are some guys in LA, man, doing some things on volumes that are incredible right now, man. Like when you watch it, you're just like, you're holy shit.
I think there's a huge advantage or a huge benefit to the actor as well in this genre, in the sci-fi action genre.
Yeah.
Where over the last 3 decades, everything has transitioned to this just, CGI
punch
fest. Yeah, like everything in your shot is computer generated. Has become more and more the case over the last 3 decades or so. And it's like this gives, and they've talked about this, and some of the behind the scenes footage that some of the actors have talked to, on the Mandalorian have talked about it, about how you're on Tatooine. You're standing there and you're like, The director doesn't have to say, okay, now there's the binary sunset. There's two suns over there and they're going down. You're like, I'm just looking at the two suns and I'm naturally reacting to how that makes me feel and not having to imagine how it would make me feel.
I'll go a step farther. It's even better for the art, for the actors, or for the, you know, for the camera facing people, because you don't got to go to, you know, Kazakhstan, or I don't know, that's not a real place, but you don't got to go to those places to shoot this. You don't got to go, you know, we shot in Iceland a couple of years ago. You don't got to send your crew to Iceland to go shoot some shit on a glacier somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, you could do it in a volume, you know, and I think it's safer, and it's, you know, as long as it's prepped properly, you know, I think it's better for everyone. It's not just, you know, the actors either. I think it's, you know, directors and crew. Like, a crew in the desert sucks. I've shot in the desert. It's horrible. You know, a crew in cold weather sucks. Rainy weather sucks. That, you know, we saw, what was it? Damn it. My Strange New Worlds producer showed me some stuff. I forget what it was from, like 1887 maybe, or I don't know, one of those period pieces where they were shooting rain on stage. So they had the LED wall and they shot live rain.
What? And
it was, and I looked at it, we looked at it, and I was like, this is the future. This is how you utilize this technology in a way that is making it hyper realistic.
No one in the crew is getting wet.
No, well, I mean, actors, the actors,
that's what I mean. That's what I mean, though. But like, you could shoot it 100 times without the crew getting ornery about being standing in the rain.
Exactly, yeah. And like,
the actors want to get wet. They want
environment, right?
Want to get rained on.
Environment where the actors are not. You're not out in the cold getting wet with water on something. You know what I'm shooting, those old school things, you know. And I think that those are the things. That's what the reason why we might see it progress as quickly and as fast as it is, because it makes it cheaper in the sense that you don't have to ship people to some weird place.
Right.
You don't have to, you know, run a whole green screen and a whole crew, and then you don't have to have a whole VFX crew remove green screen on a whole sequence of shots. You know, maybe it's only a handful of shots now, you know. So that's where I think the savings really comes in for productions in that sense.
And suddenly the worst part about the location is the commute on the 405.
Yeah, exactly. There are sometimes I don't even want to, I'm supposed to go visit a wall, and I just don't want to drive down there. I'm just like, I love you guys, man, but we work remote, and I get to work remote, thankfully. And the thought of having to get on that 405 at like 9 o'clock in the morning with all those maniacs makes me really anxious. So it's hard for me to want to do that.
Dude, you mentioned having to correct things if you shut on the volume and it didn't go right. I asked a friend who works for a company who has a volume stage. It's a smaller one, but we're actually shooting some things for Mosh Isley on this.
Oh, no way.
And I asked him, but he didn't know the answer. My question was, you have the digital asset that's on the wall, right? And then you've got the talent in front of it. If you then want to replace it, you're going to have to roto regardless. But because you have the background, can't you create an alpha channel from that? Does that make it any easier to have the plate? And is there nothing in the software at this point that makes it any easier, or are you still sort of
not if you shoot like if you're saying like if you shoot on a volume and you don't want that particular background, you want something else back there after you shoot it,
right?
Oh no, yeah, you're sending roto overseas, and it's gonna be quite a bit easily. And then it's like, and then you got to make sure that like when it comes back, depending on the action, like if you're jumping around and being crazy and like if it's a music video, for instance, right? I'm just using that as an example. It would gnarly. Like you're talking the work to replace a volume background is outrageous for sure.
So all of the tracking data is purely positional on the camera, and you know with the trackers on the camera for you know, to get the correct parallax, it's purely positional. There's nothing else in there. Those, right, is what you're telling me? You already answered the question, but I'm just.
But like, isn't that part of what I would imagine that doesn't happen very often. Like getting through a shoot and saying, you know what, we actually don't want that behind there because of the ability to previs what you're going to put up on this thing now. I mean, it's different than going like trying 100 different things on a green screen to say like, well, maybe it should be this or that or the other thing. You've now prepped it all the way through to say, I already know exactly what it's going to look like when it goes to air, basically, minus the actor standing in front of it. So you're not left holding the bag of like, I don't like it now that it's done.
If it's ever came to that point, I've never seen it come to that point. Like, but there have been times where something happens, right? You shoot something on the AR wall, for instance, and there's a rock on set or something that, you know, that's practical or whatever it is. There's something needs to be replaced, right? Those things get cost effective because you have to. I'm using rock as a general example, but anything that needs to change, right? Because, for instance, like we have a show that I was working on. You know, there were things where there was something in the volume that wasn't on practical set, so we had to then build that asset after the fact and pay to have that asset built after the fact to put it back into those shots because it didn't exist in the volume and it should have, right? Because and those are the kind of things that get expensive, right? So those are the things you gotta really understand. Anything that's going to cross the threshold, for instance, you know, anything that comes in contact with that volume needs to be always there, you know? So if you have a practical set of like sand dunes or whatever it is, you know, and like that has to be the same all the time. You know,
there's a lot of rocks in the Mandalorian.
There's a lot of rocks in the Mandalorian. There's a lot of, you know, like ours are like ship sets, right? So we shoot ships, the interior of ships on a set, right? And the AR wall is an extension of the ship. So it'll have a you know, an asset of the ship, of the set. It has to be lined up properly with the set. If something then is not proper in the live set, then we need to, you know, and then when we move to the side, it'll be here, but not on the screen. You know what I mean? We need to replace, those are the things that you really come into issues with on larger productions, you know.
That makes sense.
That source, you know. I know it's hard to visualize this stuff. Like people are going to like,
it makes sense.
People are not going to like this episode, you guys. This is nerdy. This is high nerd stuff.
We're nerds.
I don't know if you know this, not Shawn, but this is a Star Wars podcast.
I'm saying I don't consider Star Wars people to be as nerdy as some. You know, like it's, you know, this is high nerd stuff.
I think if they followed us,
AR volumes and things.
If they followed us this far for how many, 4 years now, they know.
Yeah, just to let you know, listeners, especially the patrons, if you hit stop at any point in this podcast, you're done. Okay, we're done with you.
You're fired.
All right, let's look at one more shot that, aside from,
if it's not the shot that I want to talk about, I'm definitely going to talk about the shot I want to talk about.
All right, so this shot, this is the other one, not volume related. There's some volume shots that in the cutaways, but this is a fully rendered shot, 100% CG. And I just remember, like, my jaw opening when I saw, like, this is the best example of this particular thing that I had seen to date. Since then, Avatar: The Way of Water came out, but at the moment that this happened, this was the best CG water I'd ever seen in my life.
I'm not gonna watch that.
Oof.
Watch it drip out. Look at this, dude.
Who did this water? Was this Scanline? Oh my
god. I don't know. But dude, watch the way it sloshes
That's
around.
Such a beautiful shot, man.
Yeah, so good.
Unreal, dude. Like, so this is multiple sims, multiple different things, all working in concert, all comped together.
Now I need to know who did that, because I don't, man.
Give us an idea of like how many different elements, so to speak, are in play here. Like,
I mean,
because the
everything's
water sim,
CG for one,
right?
Then you've got you've got multiple water sims because the water on the ground level is moving differently than the water that's falling, and then there's water reacting to it closer towards the center of that point. I mean, this is multiple sims
There's the
This is
water moving around the
different
legs.
sims, and it's different sims per shot, per angle. Every time that angle changes, that's a different sim because that water is moving differently. You know, that water sloshing around. That's crazy, man. I remember this shot now. I haven't seen this shot in a long time.
Dude, it just
Man, what a beautiful shot. That's crazy.
The physics of it are like the physics usually are what is the giveaway, whether it's somebody jumping or
Yeah.
the way something bounces or whatever.
And you can't even tell here. That looks real, man.
So
Mhm.
when I saw it, I was like, either they went so hard with miniatures and built a 10-foot long Razor Crest, and this is real water, or someone had a major breakthrough and or spent $1 billion.
Well, they probably there's specific, and that's why I said Scanline, because there are specific vendors who specialize in things like this, right? Scanline, they were like at the forefront of water dynamics. You know, I don't know that they did this or not. It could have been, they could have did this in house at ILM. I don't know. But man, that's beautiful. I mean, but there are different vendors who are good at, like, if we need certain things, we would go to certain vendors. You know, we at like for our shows, there are certain things that we do that we have our vendors that do those specific things. And I imagine that that's what they're doing here because, you know, and I would think that they would, whoever's doing it is finishing the shot because there's a lot of continuity in the way this sequence plays. You know, if you look at the background, the midground, the foreground of these shots, like this looks real, man. Like this shit looks like,
yeah, that just looks
this
like a
happened down
shipyard.
the street. Yeah, like this looks like a real shipyard, man. You know, like even that ship floating in the background, like everything, the not just the dynamics of the water though, but when you see the dynamics of the water juxtaposed with like that stillness of this background, like this wharf area, whatever this is.
The light
And that-
reflecting off all
the
those
light
like amber
reflecting,
lights in the back. They're all hitting
yeah.
off of. They're all hitting off of shit around them.
Yeah, like
in the background.
this is like epitome. This is like the top of like visual effects where like you're looking at something that is full CG. Not a motherfucking thing is real here, man.
Yeah.
Except for the work that
this is what
it.
this is kind of what I opened with about like feature film or what. It doesn't matter anymore. I mean,
It doesn't matter
insane.
anymore, you know.
This is
And
insane.
we have the same conversation all the time because you know, there is no, I would venture and I would say confidently that there are some films that don't have as good visual effects as shows like this, as shows like ours, you know. These shows are specifically world building, you know, and I think that I wish fans would realize that like these guys are building these worlds, you know, as opposed to you seeing visual effects on screen for maybe like a superhero movie, right? Like a lot of that stuff is based in you know, New York City, whatever it is. Like it might be based in like a real thing. They have a lot more they can get away with as opposed to like what's happening in these Star Wars shows or what's happening in shows like mine where like the shit doesn't exist in real life, you know. Like that shot does not exist anywhere. You know, and I think that's what makes it so incredible, you know, like that and you don't need to do that. Like that's not a volume, that's nothing. That's the director saying what they want. That's previs of a shot like that. That is probably 6 or 8 months of, you know, a vendor, a house or ILM themselves going back and saying this is refining it over and over and over and saying, hey, does this look right to you? Is this how you want? Is this real, right? And the artist might be like, yeah, this is what I think is real, but you know, it always has, you know, the producers and the EPs, they got to come in and it's got to be what they want, right? And whoever wanted that shot knew what they wanted because that is a beautiful sequence, man. You know,
I don't have a real answer, but I have something that suggests maybe it was all in-house at ILM. So
yeah,
I met a dude who works at ILM. He's a compositor. And he said, I referenced this shot to him and I asked him if they were as stoked making it as, you know, enthusiasts were watching it. And he said, basically like they were seeing early playback, looking at dailies, and they were super stoked. And John Knoll, you know, he'd come in and take a look at it and he would just kind of nod like, okay. And finally was like, okay, that'll work. You know, being like a dude who's
awesome,
an old school dude who
Yeah.
you know, would go with miniatures if possible. Was that kind of thing, just like Lucas used to do, where he would just, you know, where everyone's over the moon about the shot, and the reaction was, "That's good."
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
That's how it went down with John Knoll. So it seems like it was in house.
That's awesome.
Could be
If they
wrong.
did that water, I don't know, man. Man, that's dope. That's super dope, man. Because water is probably one of the hardest things to ever do in visual effects.
And
when you
that's
said
the one thing they outsourced, who knows?
Yeah, and when you said maybe messing with miniatures, even if it's like 10 feet long, it's like water's tough. I just saw I just saw like a 1968 like Godzilla versus King Kong, which obviously like uses so many miniatures and stuff like that, and you could tell when it's not the right scale water. You know,
I'm gonna say something real controversial. Go back and look at any of those movies and shit with miniatures in them.
Mm-hmm.
Just go back and go look at it and tell me that looks better than what we're doing today. I bet you won't. I bet you won't. That's what I'm saying. Like, I respect those guys. I currently work with people who worked on the original Star Trek stuff. They would do in miniatures. You know, I've worked with people who did the original Star Wars stuff. That stuff was incredible for its time. They're not doing this with miniatures. Yeah. I'm sorry, they're not doing it. Yeah. You know,
but like we're finally out of the window where now the technology's there.
The technology is there. That's exactly right.
Being a 90s kid and a film, you know, like obsessed with film from a super age, I'm outspoken about how I feel like as soon as someone figured out you could make something with a computer, then it was just like, let's make everything with, and you're talking in like 1996, and it was like, no, dude, no, we're not there yet. We're there now. We're there now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but I think we're just there now in the last 5-6 years or so. I think even in the late 2000s, there was still so much, you know, I don't think The Force Awakens would have been as good as it was if they hadn't relied on as many practical effects as they did in that year. You know, I don't think it was ready yet for what you see now.
Did they do that much practical? I gotta watch the behind the scenes on that. Force Awakens. Did they do that much practical though?
They did a lot.
Aside from Maz, the vast majority of the character work was practical makeup. So
and like a lot of puppeteering and a lot of
puppeteering.
Yeah, like the
Star
ships and stuff.
Star Wars is always real big on puppeteering. They still do it now with puppeteering.
The ships and stuff were for sure
full CG. Yeah,
full CG. But I just mean like, I think that it's been a long time coming to get to a place where you can say what you just said, which I agree with, which is go back and watch even the original Star Wars and say it looks better than what's happening now. Of course, it doesn't anymore. But I think I think it looked better. Personal opinion. I think it looked better than the prequels. I think the original films look better than the CGI in the prequels.
And I also
even with the ships.
That Andor and being intercut with Rogue One, right? Was Andor's intercut with Rogue One at the end? There's stuff that's intercut, right? I will say,
did they actually cross the film and the
I think they did, right? Didn't they intercut shots from that weren't used in
Rogue One? Used shots from A New Hope.
Rogue One used shots from A New Hope. So if you watch Rogue One and then A New Hope back to back, that shit is gangster. Like that shit, because like you can't tell what they intercut and what they didn't. And I think that is like the most, that is the fucking filmmaking right there, right? Like you can watch Rogue One back to back with A New Hope, because that same shot that Rogue One ends on, A New Hope opens with, right?
Yeah.
And if you watch them back to back, you can cut those two films together and it's one long ass movie. And I would watch that shit any day of the week. I will say, I'm going to say something controversial right now, and I want to know if you guys agree with me or not. Does Star Wars have a problem with the size, with the feeling of the size of their ships?
In what way? What do you mean?
So here's what I was on like Wikipedia or something, and they were like, an Imperial Star Destroyer is like, I don't know, 12 miles long, right? I have never felt like an Imperial Star Destroyer was 12 fucking miles long in a Star Wars ever. Not one show or movie have I felt like there was an Imperial Star Destroyer that was 12 miles long.
Except
maybe I'm wrong.
the one hovering over Jeddah City.
Over Jeddah. The one over Jeddah. You're 1,000%. 1,000,000% correct. Outside of that series of shots, I have never one time, and now I've been watching it. After I read that, I'm watching all the movies, I'm rewatching everything. I'm just like, 12 miles though.
Yeah,
dude, it's because there's
this scale. Feels
so how long is Vader's ship then?
Dude, yeah, it's insane.
50.
Like, that's what I'm saying. Like I would love to, and this is not like this is not saying one's better than the other, but I think if you watch Star Trek, right, what we do with scale of our ships in space is I wish I would see that in Star Wars, right? Yeah. Like if you watch Star Trek Picard, right, and you see that Borg cube and the scale of that Borg
that
cube.
one shot. Did I message you about it?
No, I don't think you did.
Oh, bro.
But like this, just you can feel the scale, right? Yes. Like, and I want that from a Star Wars. I want a 12-mile long fucking Star Destroyer. No. I want to feel that outside of that Jeddah scene, because you're right. That's the only time I have ever felt. Because if you look at the city of Jeddah, you're thinking a city of Jeddah, right? A whole city has to be longer than 12 miles. That Star Destroyer, yes, in your mind that makes sense, but outside of that, you never see that.
Yeah.
It's the only time you've gotten something as a point of reference. Like
that's the thing.
Well, that Razor Crest, how big is that Razor Crest? I keep trying to figure out how big the fucking Falcon is, though, right? Like,
yeah,
like me and my kid, who's 10 years old, she's just like, the Falcon seems kind of small, and I'm just like, but it can't really be that small. And then we were like on the ride, we're at Disney, we're looking at it, and I'm just like, it's got to be bigger than that, right? Like, it's got to be. It has to be bigger than that, right?
Here's the thing, though. I
talk to me. I need nerd talk now. I need Star Wars nerd talk. This is the time.
I mean, the reference for the Falcon is the cockpit, though. Like, you can't. You know what I mean?
So the inside is bigger than the outside. That is a problem that they addressed once they had to build it in CG for The Force Awakens.
Yeah,
and
it does feel bigger in the new movies.
But not to make this like a but conversation. But until you guys started building everything in CG in Star Trek and updating it, dude, go back and look at the Voyage Home.
Oh no, it's
the bird of prey is like 9 different sizes, dude.
It's 1,000%, 1,000%. But that's what I'm saying to you, right? That's exactly what I mean. Like, we all romanticize what we think we saw when we were kids.
Yeah.
But the reality of the situation is, like, when I'm watching it through my adult eyes, and I'm just like, not so much, guys. That looks like a miniature. I know you thought back in 1992 that looked really dope, but that don't look better than my Enterprise that we're putting out right now. That Falcon from those old movies does not look better than the Falcons that they're putting out. It doesn't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no comparison in that stuff.
A whole different level. But that said, let's look at one non-CG shot real quick.
All right. I hope it's the one I want.
It may not be the shot, but it's in the one that I have pulled up. But it's the thing. Whoops. This is a miniature.
Yeah, there's just something you could tell that it is, though.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But in a good way in this case.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks great. Familiar. It's a great shot. It's a great shot. Yeah, because it's familiar, right?
That looks like it's from 1977.
I don't have the size of it. Like, I just don't feel like,
for sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's my problem with these shows in general, right? I just think in general, I think, like, for me personally, like, when I'm watching Star Wars stuff, I'm just like, that scale feels really wonky to me, man. You know, I don't really like how you got ships being pulled into tractor beams. And I'm just like, how big is that ship compared to this one? I don't know. And that's just me. Like, look, the normal people watching this stuff doesn't give a shit, right? Like, let's be honest, especially kids. Kids don't care about it. My kid don't care about it. My kid's like, what is wrong with you? You know, like, just let the ghost be the ghost. We don't care how big it is compared to the Falcon. It doesn't matter, you know?
But me,
I'm like,
go ahead.
Was that? I want to know, the piece of me that like wants it to be, because I want it to feel real, right? Like that's the whole point of going to Batu, right? That's the whole point of going to Disney and that experience, right? Or even like, or them doing the visual effects that they are, right? Because they do amazing visual. Is we want to feel like we're there, dude.
Yeah.
I want to feel like when I'm watching, these shows and these things, I want to feel that's part of the experience, and I think that that's what we're getting now, as opposed to 20 years ago with shows and movies that we didn't get. We didn't get experience then. They didn't care about experience. They just wanted to put whatever they thought was cool on screen. And now we're getting something tailored to like, what do these people want to feel like they're doing? What are they in? Like I would love, what I would love? I'd love like a new Return of the Jedi. I want to see some Ewoks, man. I want to see what those I want to see what today's technology
you will
mixed with practical effects, of course, because they gotta do some dope shit with practical effects. I just want to see that. I want to see that stuff. I want to see what Andor looks like today. Dude, what could they make that look like today?
Hey, will you do me a giant favor? You won't.
Okay.
You won't, because this will take too much of your time. But if you want to dust off your old compositing hat.
Oh yeah, I'll take way too much of my time. What do you want? Tell me. I want to hear it.
I thought of this when I went to see Return of the Jedi for the 40th anniversary. It looked beautiful. It was great.
It did.
But on that size screen,
except for Hayden Christensen at the end, that was weird.
I mean,
it's never not weird.
It was weird.
Here's the thing. Having watched, the past however many newer films on the big screen, and that being my most recent memory, I could not unsee the matte lines on every single ship in every single shot.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me wonder, when they did the digital remasters, why didn't they just clean up the matte lines?
That's all they had to do.
You know what I mean?
Probably cost too much.
Yeah, I mean, they just wanted.
Probably cost too much. It's a lot of money.
George priority list, and that was low on it.
Yeah, that was low priority for sure.
But you know what I mean? And there's a lot of like weird tracking stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, most people aren't seeing it, but
it's weird that bothered you.
It.
Like I have it turned off. Like I used to sit here, like when I was first got into visual effects, I would sit here, I'd ruin television and movies for my wife and people and my family. I would just ruin it. Everybody who would sit around me, I'd just be like, that's wrong. Ha, ha, ha. You know what I mean? Like, because and now my brain tunes it all out, dude. Seriously.
That's
like
amazing
even those matte lines, like I just watched, I enjoyed it with my kid. We just sat there. Like I know what you're talking about because I see it, but my brain is like doesn't bump on it anymore. It's just like this is what they did back then, and this is like it's part of the it's part of love for me, man. Because when I know we might be going too long, but when I went back to school for visual effects, I went to the Dave School in Orlando. It's a digital animation and visual effects school, and a lot of these guys were original members of like they were Star Trek alumni or Star Wars alumni who started this school, and they did things in that old school way. And they taught this when I went there, they taught things in that very old school guerrilla filmmaking kind of way, right? They got us ready for production in a way that was like really production, right? Like what you're doing on production, what's important and what's not important when you're working on a movie or TV shows, right? And I have a love for that style. When I watch the old movies and I see those things, like I love that because I know what they did to make that happen.
Yeah.
Like it's endearing to me more than anything else. So like, as much as I'm like, yeah, you know what? They could have cleaned that shit up. They could have, at least for this, they could have did it for the 40th anniversary, whatever. They could have just did it, I'm like, I don't really mind it because I know how much love, I know how much love went into it. I know how much like, nowadays, if something like that were to happen, I would be like, oh, you guys are just fucking being lazy, right? But like, because you don't need to do that now. But like some of that older stuff, I watch some of those old Westerns too sometimes, or like, you watch like Kurosawa or something like that. Like I watch a lot of reference films for stuff that we're developing. And when I watch that stuff, like it's endearing to me. I love the filmmaking process. And I think that's what I love about Star Wars, because it's given these people, these directors and these filmmakers and all of these shows that they're making for us, it's given them this kind of, new tools to make this stuff that we love so much, right? Like they can expand on these stories that we love, and they have new tools to do so. You know, so like 20 years from now, we're gonna look at AR walls. We're gonna be like, haha, that was on an AR wall. You know what I mean? Like, there's always gonna be some new technology, but at the end of the day, like, whether it's visual effects or practical effects or whatever it is, like the people who made these things love them, and we love them because of it. And I think that's really special, man. You know, I think that's what's special. That's what I love about my job. You know, I love that, like, I get to wake up every day and help make something cool, you know, and help facilitate something that people enjoy. Like, there's going to be fans who are like, oh, that looks like shit, or whatever the fuck they want to say. Whatever people want to say, everybody's got their own opinion to whatever, you know. But at the end of the day, like they're doing things, people are doing things in entertainment fashion for us, right? And we love that, you know. Like, even a bad Star Wars show is better than no Star Wars show, in my opinion.
Saying, dude, preach.
You know,
like
that's the bottom line. So I don't really like what it looks like is super cool. I love how they're taking advantage of the technology. But if it was like 5 dudes in a garage trying to shoot a Star Wars, like I love the fan films. You know what I mean? Like, I love the fan films. I love everything about it because I love this, dude. You know, and I think this is important, right? Like, what we're doing right here, talking about visual effects of Star Wars, like that's what Star Wars has done for us. You know, that it's so important and so interesting that we can sit here and talk about like how good or how bad something looks in Star Wars. You know what I mean? And I think that's cool, man. You know?
I think it's just, to me too, I enjoy seeing the progress throughout history of that. So when you're talking about matte lines and why didn't take them out and all this stuff, it's like, I don't know. It's the same reason. Again, like, I just saw a 1968 film. It's like, there's the worst miniatures you could see on a boat in a shot. And I'm like, whatever, you know, you got to see that from 1968, 12 years later. Well, not even 1968 to 1977. How much different Star Wars looks than King Kong. Like, it's insane. I want to see that progress, you know?
And, you know, Star Wars is a good example of how they always push things farther than everyone else, in a sense. You know, George Lucas, man, you know, Star Wars pushed the envelope for visual effects and practical effects and all of that stuff, even makeup effects, you know. And I think that you know, when they do things, like, it's hard for me, you know. Look, the scene I was hoping you would bring up was that scene with, you know, with Grogu on the speeder bike with what's his name?
With IG,
No, with Kellen on the speeder bike. There was the rescue.
Right.
Man, bless your hearts whoever worked on that sequence. But that is the wrong way to use AR. That is the wrong way to use green screen. That was not great, in my opinion. But I love to see it, right? Like, it didn't matter, you know? And but I you know, my kid didn't pick up on that, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
She was like, look at that dope Jedi saving Grogu.
I didn't pick up on that.
That's what I'm saying. A lot of people didn't, you know, like my kid loves the original trilogy more than anything else. And I sit here and I'll watch her watch it. And I'm just like, dude, I mean, I love it, but are you sure? Like, because things are so different now. They're so fast. You watch Kenobi, any of the stuff that she's watched previously, Kenobi, all this other stuff, Mandalorian, the pace is different. Everything's different. The look is different, right? Like, things have progressed so much in every aspect, not just visually, but writing and directing and sound and music and all this other stuff, you know? So to see somebody still a 10-year-old kid still appreciate A New Hope and sit through it, a 10-year-old kid sit through it and not look away and not, you know, for 2 hours and 15 minutes, however long it is, like, man, that tells you some shit right there.
Yeah.
You know, that's timeless. And I hope that the work that I do is some kids are able to watch it at 20 years from now, 30. How long was 77, right? However long that is, man, we could only imagine that the work that we do is appreciated as such that far away, right?
Dude, that's why this podcast is called Thank the Maker.
Yeah, man.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Rad.
Respect to you, respect to everyone who is working their ass off to bring these things to the screen and give us stuff that honestly most of us don't deserve. You know, we're lucky to be getting, like you said, even a bad Star Wars is a Star Wars.
It's a good,
great.
man. You know, Put him in a bodega. I want to see Han and Greedo in a bodega remake. I'll still watch it, man. I'm ready for it. Give it to me.
Well, dude, thank you so much for hanging out with us. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
I hope I was helpful, man. I appreciate you guys.
Of course.
Just hanging out, talking, or whatever.
If you have time,
thank you guys.
We do want to have you back on in the next few days because I leave for tour before next Wednesday. But we've got the Mandalorian behind the scenes coming out tomorrow at the time of this recording. So if we want to talk about that, if you got time over the weekend, that would be sick.
Let me watch it and check in, and I'll let you know for sure.
Word.
Yeah.
Well, if listeners or viewers want to follow you on social media, you want to tell them where to do that?
VFX Shawn or Star Trek VFX. I run both of those accounts. You can follow me on there. Same thing on Twitter.
Nice.
I'm pretty active on social media, so reach out, say what's up. I'm pretty cool.
Agreed.
Yeah. Thank you guys, man. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys having me on. I love Star Wars. I love you guys as well. I think that this is super, super dope. So
it's been fun. Thank you.
This is big for me. This is cool for me. Thank you.
Well, are you going to be at Comic-Con next month?
I might be. We don't have any exhibits, but I might just be there as a fan, just hanging out with my kids. So,
well, if you're around, we're doing Mosh Eisley on Friday, right? Friday, the 21st at Music Box. So,
is that kid friendly?
Yep.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
a kid to an emo show. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a bar.
Look, we bump records, and I drink all the time. So, like, I mean, it's the same thing, right?
Yeah, you're fine. Then.
Exactly what it is.
Yeah, Star Wars emo.
You just get to wear
drinks.
Star Wars costumes to come.
Yeah. I love it. I might be in. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you're going to Comic-Con, or if you're in San Diego on the 21st of July, mosheisley.com is where you can go to get tickets. There are some remaining, but they're selling fast. It's that thing where it's crunch time and all of a sudden everyone's buying tickets and it's going to sell out. So get them, mosheisley.com. Also, if you want to support this podcast, patreon.com/thankthemakerpod is where you can do that. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button or all the things that an influencer says. Do those things. And we
hit the bell.
it.
Hit the bell.
Yeah. Force punch the bell or whatever. Do you force punch? Do people force punch?
Force punch?
Or is it just a punch? Is a punch a punch?
I mean,
you got to be able to force punch, right?
I mean, Luke force kicked. That's pretty famous. Pretty famous thing.
Question answered. All right. Dudes, thanks for hanging. Shawn, again, thanks for being here. And until next week, may the Force be with you.